Perhaps one of the most noteworthy dwarfs of the Third Age, and even throughout Middle-earth's history, would be the eventual king under the mountain, Thorin Oakenshield, the son of Thráin II and grandson of Thror. Thorin, who was born in Erebor in 2746 of the Third Age, would be forced to flee from his home in the Lonely Mountain at a young age for dwarves, after the dragon Smaug heard of the great wealth and riches Erebor had accumulated. To put into perspective how great a threat this dragon truly was, even for the dwarven might of Erebor, Smaug was known for being the greatest of dragons in the Third Age, and his coming to the Lonely Mountain was described as like a hurricane coming from the north. After taking out the dwarven guards at the front gate of Erebor, and killing off most of the men of Dale, including Lord Girion, he returned to the Lonely Mountain, and destroyed the majority of the dwarven population in the once mighty realm, with those who escaped being the only survivors. This would include Thorin himself, who happened to be outside the mountain at the time of Smaug's assault, as well as his father and grandfather, who fled through a secret back door. Smaug had effortlessly claimed the mountain and its treasure, becoming the new king under the mountain. Before we continue with Thorin's tale, it's important to note that while Gandalf spies on the necromancer of Dol Guldur in 2850 of the Third Age, he finds Thráin, Thorin's father, and is given a map and key by him as it was passed down to Thráin from Thror. Thror is killed 60 years earlier near the east gate of Moria by Ozog the Goblin, though his death is avenged in the Battle of Azanabalzar, after Dane Ironfoot II kills Ozog, beheading him as Ozog had done to Thror. Thráin and Thorin would also fight in this battle, and it is here where Thorin gains the title Oakenshield, after his shield is broken, and he hews a chunk of wood from an oak tree to use as a method of blocking attacks from orcs. He also vows to use an oak shield until he earns the title of King. Even in victory, the dwarves dare not venture into Moria again while the Balrog Durnsbane continues to live. This is at least until Balin and his company of dwarves attempt to entirely retake Khazad-dûm later on, after the tale I'm recounting. Thorin and his remaining people would settle in Dunland, eventually moving to the Blue Mountains, desiring nothing more than returning to their homeland of Erebor. The start of Thorin's journey would begin when he starts to form his plan in 2941 of the Third Age, when he by chance meets Gandalf. They congregate in Thorin's halls, the abode of Durin's folk located southeast in the Blue Mountains, and construct a strategy to regain the Lonely Mountain, with Thorin of course missing his kingdom, and Gandalf desiring for it to be back under dwarvish control, as he surmised that Sauron would attempt to ally himself with Smaug to gain dominion over Middle-earth. Erebor in particular would be a rather advantageous acquisition to the Dark Lord. Gandalf adds that he believes the quest would only succeed with Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit of the Shire. He is soft as the mud of his shire, and silly. His mother died too soon. You are playing some crooked game of your own, Master Gandalf. I am sure that you have other purposes than helping me.
You are quite right. If I had no other purposes, I should not be helping you at all. Great as your affairs may seem to you, they are only a small strand in a great web. I am concerned with many strands, but that should make my advice more weighty, not less. Listen to me, Thorin Oakenshield. If this hobbit goes with you, you will succeed. If not, you will fail. A foresight is on me, and I am warning you.
I know your fame. I hope it is merited, but this foolish business of your hobbit makes me wonder whether it is foresight that is on you, and you are not crazed rather than foreseeing. So many cares have disordered your wits.
They have certainly been enough to do so, and among them I find most exasperating a proud dwarf who seeks advice from me, without claim on me that I know of, and then rewards me with insolence. Go your own ways, Thorin Oakenshield, if you will, but if you flout my advice, you will walk to disaster, and you will get neither counsel nor aid from me again until the shadow falls on you. And curb your pride and your greed, or you will fall at whatever path you take, though your hands be full of gold.
Do not threaten me. I will use my own judgment in this matter, as in all that concerns me.
Do so then. I can say no more unless it is this. I do not give my love or trust lightly, Thorin, but I am fond of this hobbit, and wish him well. Treat him well, and you shall have my friendship to the end of your days.
Very well. He shall set out with my company if he dares, which I doubt. But if you insist on burdening me with him, you must come too and look after your darling.
Good. I will come, and stay with you as long as I can, at least until you have discovered his worth.
As a result of this meeting, Gandalf heads to Bag End to greet Bilbo, and shares his desire for the hobbit to share in an adventure, though Bilbo would initially turn this down, Later that evening, however, Thorin and his company of 12 other dwarfs would arrive at Bilbo's door, which was marked by Gandalf, to indicate the hobbit hole containing the burglar the dwarfs needed on their planned expedition. Gandalf would also arrive at the unexpected party and hand Thorin the key and map he received from Thorin's father, as I previously mentioned. The soon-to-be king under the mountain was not so convinced that Bilbo Baggins was up for the task of an adventure, and certainly not for sneaking past a live dragon. The hobbit himself doubted whether he should leave his home, but ultimately the Took side of his blood took control, and his curiosity for what lay beyond the Shire led him to joining the company the following morning. Thus, Thorin Oakenshield, along with the 12 loyal dwarfs Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf, began their trek to regain Erebor, and to slay the dragon that stole their home many years ago. Not far into their journey, they come across a light visible in the darkness of night around them, and through the rain that poured down in sheets. Bilbo, being the burglar after all, was told to investigate the source of said light, and he found that it was a fire lit by 3 giant trolls named Bert, Tom, and William. Bilbo would be caught by these trolls, and after some time goes by in his absence, the 13 dwarfs head towards the fire themselves, only to be caught with sacks put over their heads. Thorin arriving last and putting up quite a fight. Despite being nearly made into food for the trolls, they managed to survive the encounter after Gandalf returns to them, after departing from the company briefly where he distracts the trio until dawn, where the trolls are turned to stone in the light of day. In the aftermath of this encounter, they discover a troll cave housing 3 swords, originating from Gondolin, an ancient city of Beleriand founded by Turgon in the First Age. Bilbo would take the small blade that would soon come to be known as Sting, while Gandalf takes Glamdring, the foe hammer, and Thorin obtains Orcrist, the goblin cleaver. They would soon make their way to the last homely house in the Valley of Imladris, more commonly known as Rivendell. It is here where they learn the names of the swords they acquired in the Troll Cave from Elrond, and with the help of the Elf Lord, they also decipher the map Thorin inherits, learning of the moon letters. Runes that only appear in the light of the moon, and with the more cunning sort, they appear only under the light of a moon of the same shape and season as the day they were written. Elrond gathers that these runes must have been written on a midsummer's eve under a crescent moon, a long while ago. Stands by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. It is said that they stay for at least a fortnight, or 14 days, being well fed and getting well rested for their journey ahead. On the morning of their departure, they set off to travel past the Misty Mountains, and as night comes around and a thunderstorm rages on, they make camp in a small cave they believe is deserted, all while stone giants hurl boulders outside for sport. However, as you may expect, the cave is not deserted and out come goblins, who take the dwarfs and the hobbit down to their king in Goblin Town. Gandalf manages to avoid capture, leading to him rescuing his companions and slaying the great goblin with Glamdring. I won't get into the story of Bilbo getting separated from the dwarfs and Gandalf, and his game of riddles in the dark with the creature Gollum, as that is probably more fitting for a video detailing the journeys of Bilbo or Gollum themselves. Nevertheless, they eventually manage to escape the caves and land themselves in a forest after they ensure the hobbit is with them, though this turns out to be a meeting place for the wargs that roam those lands and terrorize men while they sleep in nearby villages, alongside the goblins of the Misty Mountains. These goblins, wanting revenge for their king's death, and having already planned to meet the wargs in that forest at night to attack said men, taunt the company of Gandalf, Bilbo, and the dwarves, while they hide in the trees to avoid the reach of the wargs. Struck with an epiphany, Gandalf begins lighting pine cones on fire, and blazing with an array of different colors, he lobs many of them towards the wargs, creating a ring of fire. Now, while the wargs heavily dislike fire, the goblins are not fazed and begin adding fuel to the flames in the form of wood and scraps around the trees that contain Thorin's company. However, to the chagrin of the wargs, and especially the goblins, the Lord of Eagles sends forth his kin to rescue the company, bringing them to the Great Shelf. From here they would travel shortly to the Carrick in the Vales of Anduin, and here they would meet Beorn, a skin changer, and last of his kind. They would stay in the halls of Beorn for a few days and nights, and would be given food to take on their trek into the forest of Mirkwood, riding borrowed ponies to the entrance. It is also here where Gandalf deviates from them once more to pursue another task concerning the White Council and the Necromancer. After losing each other numerous times in the dark and gloom of Mirkwood, the company discover that Thorin is unaccounted for after they recoup themselves following their battle with the great spiders that lurked in those woods. It turns out that Thorin was taken prisoner, though treated well by the wood elves of this region, and taken to King Thráin II for questioning. After refusing to answer the Elf King's questions regarding the reason as to why Thorin was in the forest in the first place, Thorin is locked away, left to his own thoughts, though with food and water, as again the elves would still treat even their worst enemies as well as reasonably possible. The companions of Thorin in the forest would soon be caught as well and brought before Thráin II, though they too declined to answer any inquiries, resulting in them being locked away much like Thorin. After being rescued by Bilbo, who utilizes the one ring he found in the goblin tunnels and escaping from the Elven Kingdom via barrels flowing down the river leading out, the host of dwarves and the Hobbit arrive in Esgaroth, also known as Lake Town. Real quick, it's important to note that Thranduil takes Orcrist from Thorin as it is Elvish in origin, and it is not returned to the dwarf until later on. Regardless, Thorin convinces the captain of the guard to take him, Fili, Kili, and Bilbo to the Master, and with the excitement of the townspeople, the Master would treat and honor the dwarves greatly. Even if he himself wasn't entirely convinced, these were the dwarves of Erebor. However, to his surprise, Thorin, after the dwarf stayed and rested for a while, would approach the Master of Lake Town and inform him that the time was right for Smaug's demise and the reclamation of the mountain. And so 3 large boats would depart with provisions towards the Lonely Mountain, and at the other side ponies waited for the dwarfs to carry them closer to their rightful home, and past the desolation of Smaug, the barren land around the mountain that suffered the destruction of the dragon. Bilbo would interact with the dragon as he descended the secret entrance into the chamber housing all of the treasure for a second time. But the Hobbit's expedition and his entire experience with Smaug is something to be told more in depth in another video. Nevertheless, Smaug's death via the Black Arrow at the hands of Bard, descendant of Lord Girion of Dale, would be closely followed by the Battle of Five Armies. This particular battle is a little unique in the fact that the armies that participate in the battle initially, or the armies that are about to trade blows, eventually end up allying against the incoming goblins and wargs from the north, particularly Gundabad and the chief goblin and son of Ozog, Bolg. While the dwarfs, men, and elves fight against the goblins and the wargs, with giant bats and eagles eventually joining the fray, and Beorn defeating Bolg in the last hour. Thorin and his company are hidden away in the Lonely Mountain, as Thorin originally decided against bartering with the elves and men of the lake, as he gradually began to succumb to greediness, a strong trait of dragons, particularly of Smaug, who long brooded over Thror's hoard. Thorin particularly sought to reclaim the Arkenstone, though Bilbo would take this as his share of the treasure, to give to Bard and Thranduil to barter with Thorin. Now, real quick, in the films it is portrayed that dragon sickness is a literal, contagious phenomenon that affects those that dwell too long near a pile of gold a dragon long brooded over. However, in the book it is significantly less, well, significant, and more so refers to Thorin's dwarvish greed, an obsession that begins to consume him as he long looked forward to reclaiming the treasure he would inherit. Though you could argue that the vapors and the stench of the dragon affected the mentality of the dwarfs who barricaded themselves in. But that may be a bit of a stretch, especially considering that some of the dwarfs shared Thorin's mindset, and some like Bilbo, such as Fili and Kili, did not. However, as the battle went on and the orcs multiplied, Thorin and the dwarfs of Erebor would march out through the front gate and help achieve victory against the forces of goblins and wargs. With this, Fili and Kili died protecting their uncle, and Thorin himself would pass from his wounds after he asks forgiveness from Bilbo for the way he acted after Smaug's death.
"No," said Thorin. "There is more in you than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell."
With that, Thorin Oakenshield, former king under the mountain, and a dwarf who would prove his valor and courage in the end, among the best of Aule's designs, would pass on after successfully reclaiming the kingdom his people lost. And because of his actions, dwarfs, elves, and men would become allies and friends in those parts for many a year. Thorin would be laid to rest with Bard placing the Arkenstone on his chest, and Thranduil returning Orcrist to him, and placing it on his tomb. And it would glow and warn the dwarfs of any dangers that may approach while Dain, Thorin's cousin, ruled as new king under the mountain, in memory of one of the most notable dwarfs in Middle-earth. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something if you were unfamiliar with the events of the books, and I appreciate those who watched anyway, even if you already know the lore well. Have a great day. See ya.